Welcome to the Gay Buddhist Forum, where teachers from all schools of Buddhism offer their perspectives on the Dharma and its application in modern times, especially for LGBTQI audiences. These talks are offered freely to the world and made possible by appreciative listeners. If you would like to support our efforts to share the Dharma with underserved audiences, please visit gaybuddhist.org. There you can donate, find a list of upcoming speakers, or enjoy many hundreds of these recorded talks dating back to 1996.
Welcome back. Now is the time we go around the room and introduce ourselves. My name is Jay Corbett.
Baruch Golden.
Drew Omen.
Ed Hartle.
Manuel.
My name is Suvit.
My name is Vinny.
My name is Peter.
My name is Robert.
I'm Hei Matsuda. Daniel.
Chancho.
Howard DePort.
My name is Gary.
My name is Douglas.
My name is Rob.
Dave Ellison.
Lee Robbins.
My name is Michael.
My name is Lassiter.
Peter.
Martin.
My name is Ray Dyer.
Jeffrey.
Jim Stewart.
My name is Tom Bruein.
Harvey.
Jim Winters.
My name is Paul Shepard.
I'm Ryan Murian.
I'm Richard Azzolini.
Larry John.
My name is Peter.
Cass Brayton.
I'm George.
Anyone else? Is anyone here for the first or second time? So please welcome. We have coffee or tea and snacks after the speaker. You're welcome to stay and socialize. And there's will also be people who go to lunch. Today, our speaker is Carol Newhouse. Carol has studied insight meditation for over 20 years and has been teaching for 10. Her root teacher is Ruth Dennison, who was empowered by the great meditation master Hubbard of Burma. And she is the guiding teacher of the Lesbian Buddhist Sangha in Berkeley. Please welcome Carol.
Hi, Larry. Larry and I go way back. I haven't seen you for a while. It's just so much fun to open my eyes and see some people that I've known for a long time and, of course, new people. The Lesbian Buddhist Sangha probably started shortly after GBF, I think. And even though we don't have a relationship, we don't do stuff together, the only relationship is really me, I think, right now coming over here. It's a great relationship. And I talk about you guys a lot over there. And I think sometimes if we were in the same town, there might be more of a relationship. But that bridge does it, But I do think of you as a brother Sangha or as a sister Sangha. And the minute I walk in here, I feel that way. There's something about the way you do things, the way you are with each other, the events you have, it's just very similar. So it's just interesting to me in that sense that even after all these years, it's that way. So thank you for having me back. And because I feel comfortable here particularly, I tend to talk a little more personally and talk about what's up for me or what my practice is going through now, or even if you don't know that, that's usually what I'm talking about. So I try to choose the topics, and that's what I do with the Lesbian Sangha anyway, about what's important, what's going on for me. And Buddhism, as you know, and the Dharma is so vast that there's always a hook somewhere that I can get back into it. And I've been practicing for more than 20 years now. We're going to have to update that. Maybe I'd like to leave it where it is. So I don't know if they sent an announcement out or not this time. I wasn't on email very much about what I was going to talk about. But I thought I'd talk about the Dharma and what I call its connection or potential connection or relationship to, for lack of a better word, psychic awareness. Or a softer way of putting that would be intuitive knowing. In order to do that, I'm going to talk a little bit about my background, so you'll see why that's important to me. Then I'm going to try to relate it directly to some of the teachings that some of you may be familiar with. And then I'm going to try to have time for a small exercise where I'll combine with a traditional kind of sitting practice a bit with what you might consider more of a psychic awareness experience. And then hopefully we'll have time to talk about all that. It's interesting to me that in a way I've sort of come full circle around this issue. When I started out working as a social worker in my early 20s, I have you have these events, right, that happen in your life and you look back on and you think, wow, that's how I started doing that. But they were kind of insignificant at the time. A young girl who came actually as one of my clients eventually came into the drop-in center for youth, right, where I was working, and had this pack of cards. And she had just bought them in the mall, and she told me to read her fortune with them. And I said, well, whatever, I have to connect with these kids, right? And so I just looked at the directions really quickly, and it just seemed like I should just put some cards down and kind of say something about them. So I kind of did that. And she said, oh, that's very good. That's interesting. Now I'll do it for you. So I said, oh, okay. I was taught you're supposed to be reciprocal, in your therapy. And she started talking about what was going on in my life and pointing to pictures of people that looked like my parents, and an event that was about to happen soon that I was concerned about. And it kind of blew my mind. And this was just a 16-year-old girl, you know what I mean? And I don't know if it was her and her own openness and abilities or partly my openness to what was happening and to the images. But after that day, I drove right over to the mall and I bought a pack of tarot cards. And some of you may have done the same around that time. It was just when this kind of stuff was coming out in the culture. And it was called the Wait Tech. It was very much Western European. It had a bunch of knights and horses and things like that in it. It's the one a lot of people started with in the 70s, actually. And I used it and used it and used it for years. I still have the deck. I've used other ones since that because, as you know, if you walk into a spiritual store now, you might find 20 tarot decks. I mean, it's grown so much. So that was my opening. Shortly after that, the whole New Age movement started. I moved to Berkeley. Make a long story short, I started studying with people around psychic awareness and eventually started calling myself a psychic reader. I don't know if some of you remember, but that was happening quite a bit. That wasn't just something strange people who came to town did. I was doing it. And I was doing it off of tarot cards and other techniques, that I learned to be, quote, open and aware of what was happening between me and other people when they presented questions or issues to me, to be helpful to them, right? About, I don't know what year this was. Let's say, well, I met my root teacher in the late 70s. So it must have been around then. I was in Boston. And another event happened. I saw a flyer with a woman teacher on it. Of course, I was a feminist. And it said something about Buddhism, but it didn't say that so much that interested me. It said the same words. Openness, awareness, insight, understanding. Oh, I'll go to that. I had no idea what I was getting into. If any of you have been on a 10-day Theravada Buddhist retreat, at IMS or at Spirit Rock, you probably know they're relatively silent. In those days, they were silent. I mean, nobody talked to anybody except during the Dharma talks. And the whole thing totally blew my mind. I remember going down to the basement of IMS, which is the Insight Meditation Society outside of Boston. And they had a payphone. And I remember dialing my dyke friends in Oregon on the phone and saying, "You're not going to believe where I am." And try and explain to them, which I could hardly do, what was going on and how good it was being for me. I got back to my lesbian collective house in Boston, and I walked in the door, and the whole place looked different to me. I mean, if you've had those experiences of coming off retreat, you know, you have a deeper understanding into who these people are, maybe into how to rearrange the furniture. Even, you know, everything looks clearer. And also the feeling tone, at least for me, is different. You feel more open, understanding of people. And that only lasts a while, especially if you're not practicing, which I wasn't in that day. But to make a long story short, that got me connected with Ruth Denison. And what I did was I started helping Ruth to start women's retreats in the desert. And a bunch of us lesbians used to go down there and meditate. And soon I kind of wasn't so interested in being a psychic reader so much anymore. Although I didn't dislike it, it just didn't happen so much. I was too busy with this new practice. And I remember one day Ruth came to me after. She's very, I hate to use the word psychic because she doesn't really like it, but she's very intuitive, let's say, about her teachings. She came to me after a sitting down in the desert and she said, "Darling," she was German background, "you know that psychic stuff you do, don't do that anymore." And it just clicked. I said, I don't really want to. In fact, I'm not doing it anymore. You know, it wasn't like, don't do that, you know, it's bad or something. It was just sort of, isn't that really what should be happening? So I didn't do it for several years. And then just about the time, maybe 10 years later, when I was starting to get back interested in it or curious about the cards again and stuff, or people were asking me, Ruth comes up to me after sitting, and she says, "You know, darling, that stuff you used to do with the tarot and everything, you can do that again." You know, and you know why I'm telling the story, because somehow she saw or understood a kind of a growth. This is from maybe a Dharma perspective. In me, that she felt that I was safe now, that I understood in a deeper sense of what this was I was doing, and that I could be more helpful perhaps to people. The thing that I left out, I realized, was in between these two events with Ruth, near the first one where she was saying, I wouldn't do that so much anymore. I was having trouble doing it. People, I don't know if you've had these experiences, but people were coming to me with very serious questions. You know, like, do I have breast cancer? You know, and things like that. And I never encouraged that, and I didn't really want to go there with that kind of thing. But people, you know, are scared and they ask questions. And I didn't know how to answer these questions. You know, where should I move? What should I do with my life? That was a little easier. But I really began to realize I didn't really want to answer the question exactly in that traditional sense. Certainly not make predictions. So I was getting a little scared. And so I think that when the Dharma presented itself to me in terms of Ruth, you know, I ran. I ran there to try to understand what was going on a deeper level. So after all that time, I have found, especially in maybe the last 3 or 4 years, a renewed interest, you know, in particularly the tradition that I was the closest to, which was reading images, if you want to call it that, or looking at different images or colors or manifestations of the truth, if you want to think of that, or the truth in the moment. And curious about it, about who made these images and why they made them and how they made them, and, you know, even from an artistic viewpoint. So that's where I am now. So what I'd like to tell you, that what I'm talking about when I think of these examples are things that have been with our culture for a long time, right? Things like color healing, you've probably heard of that, working with color, images such as these. I mean, this is an image, right? It's a very powerful, constructed, purposeful image that we are actually told, I think, in some circles of the Dharma to gaze at, you know, or to look at or to incorporate in our lives. Not just because it's nice, but because it's constructed, right, in a certain way to do what? To wake us up. This is an image of an awakened being, part of the practice, especially in the Tibetan tradition, right, if you're familiar with that, is to use images of awakened beings. They're very specifically constructed for our own understanding or awakening. So that's a long tradition in many cultures. Nature, of course, I won't go on and on about that. Many speakers who come here, I'm sure, talk about nature, but that's the other thing that we have in our presence constantly. talking about the Dharma principles, showing us interaction, interconnectedness, right? Interrelationship. What is the change in the weather, right? If not some kind of interconnected change of which we're not responsible, well, we're getting more and more responsible for, unfortunately, because we are connected with it. But I mean, ultimately, it does this thing, and we interact with it. And it's a mystical, integrated, interconnected experience that was available to us. I wake up in the morning and I look out the window, and I love to see what the weather is. It's a kind of a practice for me, something that teaches me something about how the elements interact and the interconnection of all things. Because we are made up of these elements. And that's the teaching. We are fire, air, earth, and water. We interact in a similar way. And many teachings play on this more. There's an actual teaching in Theravada Buddhism called the Four Elements, where you actually do meditate with fire, air, earth, and water as who you are. And you become in touch with them in your own body. There's also the kasinas. You may have heard of that in Theravada Buddhism, where the Buddha instructed his monks to use these examples of fire, air, earth, and water to deeply understand themselves and their environment. The one that comes to me the quickest is they were instructed to make a clay, just like a pancake, sort of a very soft dirt clay sphere, or more like a round object that's flat, and meditate on it. Just stare at it again with your eyes open and meditate on it. And the relationship between that, which was really earth, right? And their own earthliness. Very interesting things. So all this, all these different examples I'm giving, the I Ching again, very strong, for those of you who've worked with that, relationship to change, the book of changes, that's what it's called, right? And the way that it uses the image. I don't know if those of you are familiar with it, but there's predictions and you're told to act certain ways. But also it'll say the image. If you throw the coins, you get this image. And the image is very nature-based, right? So it could be the clinging fire, or the mountain, the lake on the mountain. You know, things like this. Thunder on the mountain. And then they will go and tell you, interpret that. You know, therefore you should really start talking to people more and assert yourself, and you know, or go home and don't do anything. You know, be careful. There's warnings, but it's based on nature images, and also a lot. I realized reading it over yesterday. The weather, lake on the mountain, the joyous lake. It's another one. So I experimented with all this, right? And I worked with all this over the years. Also, I'm going to try to mention this one a little bit. What I call the relevance of place. This one's a little harder to relate to the Dharma, but well, I just sort of one thing. You know how some of the suttas always say, when the Buddha goes to speak, it says, when the Buddha was in Deer Park, you know, and his disciple so-and-so was there, he gave the speech too. Or when the Buddha was on the mountain so-and-so. So they situate him oftentimes. And I don't think that's just, historical reference. I think these places had energy or were sacred in some kind of way, especially after people had practiced there for a long time. Caves, you know, things like that. So the relevance of place has always fascinated me. And I've traveled a lot, and I'm sure many of you have too. So whether we're just talking about the city that we choose to call our own, like the wonderful city that we're in right now, or whether it's simpler things, just like a place in a park that we like a lot. The Dharma and also psychic awareness brings us into relationship with place. And we understand ourselves through the choices we make, right? About why we want to be in this place and not that place. Now, why I'm not in Nebraska and I'm here in San Francisco is pretty obvious. But some of the things may be a little more subtle. At one point I had a Puerto Rican girlfriend, and we lived in Puerto Rico. I lived there 4 years. And I was into spiritual psychic practices. And the power of islands became very, very clear to me at that time. I grew up on Long Island. You might not consider that an island, but it is one, believe it or not. It is. He's Paul's laughing. But it is. It's a relevant thing to be surrounded by water, even if it's near New York City. And then I spent time in Hawaii after that. I lived in Puerto Rico. I went to Crete recently and almost wanted to move there. And it finally dawned on me that something was going on about islands. And, I could probably give a whole talk on what it was, but you get the point. Being aware of place and the teachings that brings to you. Okay. So what does all this really have to do with Buddhism, right? You may have picked up a few references, generalities. Well, if Buddhism isn't called an awareness practice, I don't know what it's called. Right? That's actually my favorite line of all of them. When I meet somebody, well, what do you do? Well, I'm just trying to be more aware of who I am in the world and how I relate to people, and be mindful of my actions. Well, all the practices we do, I think you'll agree, if you're doing meditation, bring you into a greater awareness of yourself. That's the large part of it, and how we interact with others. The concentration practices, right? If you're doing Vipassana and you're doing breath work, or any kind of breath work really, but particularly Anapanasati within the Buddhist tradition of Vipassana, you really, really get in tune with the way to focus on one object, right? It's yourself, it's your breath. But the teaching is, right? Don't allow your thoughts to distract you, right? Don't go off into la-la land, as my teacher would say. Just rest with the breath. And we all know it's difficult to do, right? Well, that's designed for a purpose, right? To bring us into awareness. So I may want to get to know you really well, and I may want to be present with you while I'm having coffee with you. But if I can't stay there, right, because I'm so concerned about whatever, that I'm not really having a good time with you, right? We're not relating. Or we're not relating deeply and compassionately. But if I have a technique or an awareness that I can just, come on, forget it, get with this person, stay with the moment. Especially when they say something I don't like, maybe. Whoops. Going into judgment or something, rather than staying there. Not only do I have less of an experience, it's meaningful, but we don't have a clear exchange. I don't awaken to the purposefulness of what we're doing together. And I would say I'm not very intuitive or psychic. Can you kind of see the connection? Not that I'm trying to read my friend. It's not on that level. It's not that level anymore. It's just being there with what is, really being there with what is. So that's one connection. It's really important to think about one's motivation for all this. This is another connection. And I think that's what was troubling me in the day when I was getting these questions that were difficult to answer and I didn't really understand what I was doing. So through the Dharma, it's reinforced time and time again. What is my motivation? What is my intention for practice? Well, it's the alleviation of suffering, right? How many times has the Buddha, they say, if there's one thing I want you to know or practice for, it's alleviation of your own suffering and others, right? Oh, so this awareness is just so that I can heal. I can heal myself and I can heal other people, right? We can become happier people, nicer, better people. Okay. So if I can keep that in my head, all this other awareness practice, whether it's reading tarot cards or whether it's sitting Vipassana, I'm on the right track. So they link in that kind of way. Just reviewing the precepts briefly, taking the precepts and trying to practice in a more intuitive way. There's a perfect link. It's my guide. It's my pathway, right? Non-harming, right? it answers the question of, if you think you know something about somebody, you're getting a feeling about them, do you want to talk about that or not with them? Right? Is it helpful to the relationship, to you or them? Is that harming? Are your ego involved in wanting to tell them something? Or is this just more something that's meant for you? Non-harming. Deep listening, right? That comes off right speech, right? That's another one. Let's talk about the intoxication one. The fifth precept that says we shall not take intoxicants, or we shouldn't overconsume because it clouds our mind, makes us less clear. I'm afraid I agree. And that doesn't mean I don't drink a glass of wine now and then. I wouldn't say that. But when I'm really trying to be present and it's something important to me, even though I have used things, I won't go into what, but other things, because there's many traditions, of herbs and all kinds of things that bring on certain kinds of awareness that are abnormal or paranormal or something. And I'm not saying that doesn't happen, but what I find with that, be interested to hear what you think, is that even though there's a flash of insight or awareness or something, it doesn't have the same staying power. It's not as useful to me. And I may not remember it, or my remembrance will be distorted. And I'm not present enough to screen my own projections or my own ego needs that will come up. So there's a lot of dilemmas with it. Let's just put it that way. So I understand why Thich Nhat Hanh, for example, particularly really pushes that. And just for moral grounds, not taking what is not given, that precept, in other words, being generous, that's the other side of it, has helped me be more open-hearted towards any kind of readings or psychic events or things that may or may not occur in my life. Generosity towards myself and others just makes me a more open, real person, not deluded in any way about who I am and what's possible. We go to 12, right? We go to 12.
We like to finish maybe 5 or 10 minutes early.
Okay. I think I'll try to talk about this a little. For those of you who are familiar with Theravada Buddhism, again, Vipassana, there's 4 foundations of mindfulness, they call it. I look at it as 4 ways in, the 4 pathways for seeing or understanding, and you may be very familiar with them. The first one's the body, or the body breath. And so many of you, I'm sure, get physical reactions, either in daily life or while you're sitting, right? Pain or pleasant sensations. This is meaningful, correct? I mean, that means something. It can be just something physical, especially when we're sitting, our leg hurts or something, our knee. But it could be more than that. It could be telling us about an uncomfortable event that we're in, or a situation that we're not aware of, or it could be more pleasant than we expected. So the body sensations that we're taught also, the second one, sensation, hot, cold, movement, coolness, vibration. I think of it as the vibe in the room that we pick up. That's not so far from some of the psychic or whatever intuitive practices that people have taught over the years for knowledge and for understanding. Mind states is another one. By that we mean our emotions, our feeling state, our attitude, like anger, generosity, happiness, fear, envy, calmness, all this kind of mind states that we hold. Our awareness of that, right, is a Vipassana practice very much about being aware of these things so that we use ourselves constructively in the world and we're healing and helpful to people and to ourselves. And then thought. Thought is getting closer to images. It's interesting. But awareness of our thoughts, very much, very close, right, to any kind of psychic reading practice. It would have to be. You know, you walk by somebody and you think, whoa, what's... You know, or they say something to you and you think, do they mean it that? Or that reminds me of... Or something. And you get kind of an insight or something into what's going on. Insight. What is Vipassana called in English? Insight meditation. Right? So these are just little links that I'm trying to make. The difference being the motivation and the ethical basis that the Dharma rests on. The ethics that I mentioned, the precepts, it's full of ethics. You know, how to be a good person, how to be... If you've got that, and that's the way, really, Buddhism was taught in Asia. You know, if you've got the ethical, moral, if you like, way of being, then any practice probably, right, is just fine. Because you're going to be going in the right place with it. How many of you actually have done or still do in any way some of the things I've mentioned, I Ching or Tarot or something like that? Other things? Yeah, a few of you. It's not as popular as it used to be, but I like them both. And they're very safe tools, especially the I Ching. But the Tarot is as well, and I think it's very revealing. For those of you who practice Tibetan Buddhism, and you're not going to like this, I exaggerate sometimes, but I was almost going to say you're doing tarot in a sense, in that the images, you know, in Tibetan Buddhism that you practice with are deities. I mean, if you look at tarot, they're images of gods or goddesses or people doing spiritual things. The major arcana, the major cards, they're all people like the hermit or the empress, who's really a goddess, you know, things like that. And you're actually looking at them and gaining knowledge from them, right, when you sit in Tibetan practices. And then you actually even incorporate them into your being, if you take the empowerments, they call them. So I have trouble seeing a big difference there. I think it's in the instruction and the seriousness of practice. Okay. How about we take about 5 minutes here to just do an exercise? Is that okay? And as I said earlier, it's meditation in the beginning that should sound very familiar to you. It's just basically relaxation and openness and creating a calm mind state, like we do in the Dharma often. And then after that, I will ask you to explore what I'm going to call the healing world of color, actually. I chose that because I don't think it's too far from certain Dharma practices. And just be open to what comes. There's no right or wrong answer for sure on this one, but just see. Okay, let's just close our eyes for this for a moment. Very similar to the way that you would be working with the beginning of a sitting meditation. So to begin, the posture, you know, just being in touch with the body, whatever is comfortable to you, relatively straight back. Feeling your body on the cushion or on the chair. Feeling the support that the earth provides. Just really allowing yourself to relax into her. And taking a moment to scan the body for any tension, any places that you may be holding. If you find that, see if you can just open it up a little, relax it a little. Maybe breathing to it. going to ask you to allow for what I call open or spacious mind. This is your genuine mental energy. Just seeing if you can allow for the mind to open, relax again. Create a spaciousness in the sitting. Clear and radiant. And in that clarity and radiance, see if you can just rest there. Thoughts arise, just let them float through like clouds in the sky. Sense of calmness, sense the openness, the expansiveness of genuine mind. When distracted, just be willing to return again to this calm abiding. Now, I'm going to ask you to see if you can participate with me in an awakening to the healing, purifying energy and information within the world of color. Information and maybe even healing energy. I'm inviting you to allow yellow light to come into this space that you've created, to this genuine mind, expansiveness. However that is for you is fine. If it's perceived as a ray of light, or perhaps just kind of a general feeling of yellow, whatever tone, whatever intensity, just let it come to you. Flowing and alive. Seeing if you can be within this color yellow. How that is for you. Just notice. It doesn't have to be a certain way. Can you feel the aliveness of the color? Its living quality? See if anything speaks to you out of the color. We're penetrating into the elemental life of the color yellow. And it may be penetrating you as well. See if there's any kind of meaning or even form that can emerge from the yellow light. Does it have a a shape of any kind. And this isn't necessary, it's just an experiment. Or maybe a meaning or a motif to it. Okay. So just see if you can let go of all that now. Simply let the yellow light fade. Come back to the body. The genuine mind, the clear sky mind. Just let it go, let it dissolve. Feel that openness again. Now we're going to allow for the color blue. Just invite it in to the degree it feels comfortable. In the same way. Notice any reaction, pleasant, unpleasant. Let it fill up your space, your mind and heart to the degree you feel comfortable. Can you be with the color blue? Can you feel the color's living energy? Whatever tone it is, again. Could be light blue, could be a darker blue. And then again, does anything speak to you out of the color? Is there any kind of message or even form? Or shape? It's not necessary, sometimes there is. Or some kind of theme that emerges. We're going quite quickly, I know. It's just to give you a taste of this. So then just again, let it all go, the blue light, off into the atmosphere. Bringing that white light of clarity, calm abiding, the genuine open-hearted mind, where we began. Just relax. And then when you're ready, you can open up your eyes. Okay, here's time for discussion. Any questions, any comments about what we just did? I'd love to hear if you can relate to it. Yes, Harvey, was it?
It's interesting. My meditation focuses on my breathing and the asana style. When you started that exercise, well, first of all, I'm very much into not controlling. Just kind of letting what happens happen. That's the focus of my meditation. Just whenever my distractions happen, I come back to my breath. That's the whole purpose of it. And it's kind of an analogy about how I want to live my life. And when somebody talks about psychic and controlling things, I cringe. and it just kind of, it seems, and then I try to open myself up to your exercise. And part of what happens in my meditations are often, almost always really visual. I get images, I see people, I see colors, and I notice them and come back to my breath. And during your exercise, I felt, I was still doing all those colors, but I was just kind of like, it didn't feel comfortable trying to control that to go someplace. It felt more comfortable to just be here and go where it took me.
What were you trying to control? You mean
Well,
the fact that I said blue and do
Well,
blue?
when you talked about open space,
Uh-huh.
I didn't know what to do with that, or what does that mean? And it started bringing it down to an intellectual rather than a spiritual
right.
level. And then when you talked about, the yellow, like, aside from images of people, I get images of people a lot, but also I always tend towards blue.
Uh-huh.
And when we started talking yellow, I'm just trying to see, it felt strange to try to force the yellow.
Right, so there's no reason to force
Right,
it.
and so I just kind of withdrew from that and just let what happens happen.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt much more comfortable with that, and that was good exercise for me in the sense that it reinforced my sense of going where it takes me and not allowing it to try and push it.
Great. Good. Thank you. Yes.
I want to ask you something about your psychic perceptions. I'm just curious as to when you have them, do you know them? Do you come to know them? Do you just read it? You don't know it, but it's there before you, or?
Well, it's different for everyone, right? Remember the old teaching of clairsentience, clairvoyance, and clairaudience, right? So hearing clearly. Clearly, what are we supposed to get in the Dharma? Clarity. So hearing clearly, seeing clearly, feeling or sensing clearly. So it's different for different people. I think it evolves differently. Right now, for me, seems to be more like ideas and thoughts. It seems I get these ideas, and they're based on things that have happened. They're sort of conglomerations of things that aren't logical, but somehow they appear, and sometimes there's an image with them. And they're usually things that I should pay attention to or do or get involved in or something. I think the word psychic is very troublesome, because it used to be very much about controlling people and controlling things and making things happen. That's not what I mean by that. But I use the word because I don't want to be afraid of it, really. It's just that it's an intuitive knowing of things. And then what you do about it is the whole game. It's not so much that you know something, really. Well, who cares? It's how you handle it. That's the hard part. And that's why I think the Dharma is so important. Yeah. Jim.
Thank you for a wonderful talk. I was reminded years ago when I was sort of getting into all of this in the early 70s, I read Evelyn Underhill's book on Christian mysticism and the lives of the mystics, and she talked about how after their initial sort of initiation experience, they had a vast increase of psychic awareness after they began their sort of practice, their training, and they had to put blinders on and go through the temptation to power of that, and that if you followed that, you would go into magic, and that was about power. But their path was about love. But at the completion of their long journey, whenever they needed to know something, they knew something.
And their love was influenced by this as well. That's the interesting part. What they knew, I think, I don't know that much about the Christian mystics, but what you know is how to be more skillful, how to be more compassionate, how to be more loving. You know it intuitively.
But also pragmatically. One of the great Italian mystics was a political consultant just because she got what was going on. She was just a resource after the years of meditation, so it was very interesting.
Yeah, and I can understand how they had to close down because that's
so tempting.
Right. Because I think I don't know if you meant that by control, but that's where the word psychic and control and ego and all that gets mixed up. Because if you know something, then you feel like you have to use it or do it and be better than someone else and all the rest of it. It's not about that at all, but it's kind of mind blowing when it happens, like you described. It's just another thing. Yes? Anybody else? Oh, you must have something to say. Should I pick on somebody?
When you asked,
okay. Who's that? No, you can go. The green.
when you asked what the colors were saying to us, I received specific direction for what's up for me right now in my life, and I embraced it. I really appreciated it.
Oh, good. Good. Well, was the yellow or the blue more instructive?
They were both instructive.
Okay.
The yellow said jump.
And you can do both,
And I
right?
can do both.
How interesting. Yeah, very interesting. Yes, Paul, were you going to say something?
Yeah, it was really, I'm very tired, and sometimes when I'm really tired, my resistance goes down in a good way. And so I actually imagine gold to be yellow. And oftentimes, I guess I want it to be like this was like a big thing that came in on top of my forehead. It just made me feel so relaxed. And, you know, what I got from it was the preciousness of myself. You know, because I often disregard that.
And gold is a very precious metal. I mean, if you look at it that way, those are the associations you can start to make with these things. And then how do you in real life really feel about gold? Do you ever wear anything gold? Would you even dare to do such a thing? I mean, you know, some of this translates into practical life, like ritual. That's almost ritual, right? Okay, I'm going to wear this gold bracelet because I value myself. I mean, that's maybe going too far. You get the idea. You know, at least having a yellow flower around or something. I don't know. Interesting stuff. We have just a couple more minutes, yes?
This is what I was thinking of, and this is not
it's Lee, right?
Lee, about colors, though. I found that interesting also. But about the earlier stuff that you were talking about psychic issues, which I've been probably skeptical about. But when you put it in the framework of wider connection, it fits more. And I've just read something this morning and had some other experiences yesterday. The New York Times Magazine section has a article on social contagion, which I would strongly recommend to everyone. And what it's about very briefly is how behavior of your friends' have a significant probability of affecting your behavior. So if you probably heard some of the popular stuff around it. If they get fatter, you're more likely to get fatter, and vice versa. And yesterday I spent the day in a workshop on reading micro-emotional expressions that last 1/5 to 1/30th of a second.
Very
It's
interesting.
Paul Ekman's work.
And then the third piece about going on retreat. So one thing that people worry about the first time they do this is, oh my God, I'll be bored out of my mind. And what we start to do is discover what enormous amounts of stuff there is that's going on that we aren't consciously aware of. So it may be that the psychic piece is, picking up some of that information, which is really there, and if we could do it, we could point it out, but we aren't aware of it consciously.
Yeah, it's about knowing. If you just want to say knowing, I think we should dump the word because it's really dangerous in the way it's been used. But I just want to honor the fact that a lot of good traditions also have used that word, and haven't really misused it. But yeah, there's a vast knowingness of what's going on inside of us, around us constantly, and that's what awareness practice is really about. I think that's what mindfulness generates in us, more awareness of what's really going on. And leads you to the right article at the right time, I think. I do, because there's a connection with all these things. Hasn't that happened to you? You go and get your hair cut somewhere, and you sit down, you pick up a magazine, they're not ready for you. Oh my God! This is just what I was thinking, or just what I was reading. Just call it the interconnection of all things. That's fine. That's a more Dharma way of thinking about it. But know that you noticed that. Know that you didn't just throw the magazine down and didn't realize that was related to something, that might be significant that you happen to pick up that magazine and not the other magazine, or that you might have picked it up and not turned to that page. So you're on to something. This is meaning for you, I think we're going to have to stop, aren't we?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Will you hang out for the presentation?
Sure, I'll be around.
Other questions? Thank you. Are there any announcements? Yes.
The Rainbow Symphony is playing again next Saturday night at Conservatory Music. The Dvorak's 8th Symphony and Rachmaninoff's Variations on a Theme by Paganini. Dan Glover, pianist, not to be confused with Dan.
Other announcements? You the host?
I'm the host.
Okay, go ahead and do the host.
There's some things to eat and help yourself to tea.
tea and make sure you clean your cup with soap and water. And there's a Dharma bowl, and suggested donations are $5 to $8 if that speaks to you. And people meet at around 12:30 afterwards to head out to lunch. Some people do that. And
Newsletter?
I don't know if I know what the newsletter is. There's a newsletter out there.
Yeah.
There's a newsletter on
The
the
sign-up
Cadenza.
sheet.
There's a newsletter and a sign-up sheet on the Cadenza. If people have to get on the mailing list.
Okay. Jim?
Yeah, if you, like from January to June, signed up to get the email, and we've had a break in our chain. Sign up again, because the names didn't get sent. So you didn't get officially invited to join the Yahoo group chat list. Or you can just go to the website and join them.
Yeah, you can do it yourself.
Also, we are reviewing and aesthetically uplifting our website, and if you have taken photographs in your life, or you know of images that are potent and beautiful and significant to you, vis-a-vis the Gay Buddhist Fellowship, please get them to us, and we're going to try and fit them in different places.
Any other announcements? Okay. Howard?
Yeah, Carol, a delight
Thank
to
you.
have you here again. Wow, too far between visits from you. Send our greetings to your Sangha also.
Thank you.
Our speaker next week will be the Sangha here. So as we gather next week, we'll break into small groups and discuss questions that are raised by the facilitator or whatever's working you in your life and the Dharma. And next week, a major portion of our Sangha will be off on retreat. So I've asked Carol and Jay to help facilitate a merit ceremony for you as you go your way for next week.
So let's gather in a circle, and if you're going on the retreat next week, could you gather in the center of the circle? And if you're not going to be on the retreat, then be on the outside.
So as often is done at the end of a Buddhist meeting or Buddhist teaching, we dedicate the merit, which simply means we send the energy. We offer prayers and blessings based on what we practiced that morning and the good will and the good energy raised to sentient beings everywhere. And this morning we're going to concentrate on our brothers in the center of the circle, whose intention is to go off on retreat next weekend. May they be happy about this. May they be compassionate towards themselves and their experience. May they awaken in whatever way is necessary and helpful to them. And may they also benefit greatly from their own experience and share those benefits with all they meet on their path when they leave. Would anyone else like to offer any blessings or prayers or well wishes to them?
May your love for each other deepen.
Drive safely.
So all these wishes for the benefit of our brothers in the center of the circle, for ourselves, and for all beings everywhere. May we all be happy, and may we all be at peace, and may we all awaken to our highest potential. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to the Gay Buddhist Forum. If you would like to hear several new talks per month and be notified of upcoming speakers so you can participate live, please subscribe to this podcast, like us on Facebook, and join our mailing list by visiting gaybuddhist.org.